TF2 has a stair problem. That's right, not only are the doors whack, but nearly every staircase in this game is flawed in some way. And in this video, I'm going to break down why and try to come up with a solution. But first, let's take a look at some of TF2's stairs so that we understand what's going on. As usual, we're kicking things off by looking at the best map in the game, Dust Bowl. Despite all of its flaws, which I went over in my previous video, it still shows us how stairs function and one way of remedying a problem they create. What is that problem? Well, if I make a small staircase here in my test map and load it up in TF2, I think you can see for yourself. When I walk over it, my character teleports up and down each step, causing both him and my screen to jitter, which is an eyesore to say the least. You also can't trimp or surf up it, which alone ruins the movement mechanics of several classes, so this is a big problem. That's why nearly all stairs in the game have some form of collision added to them. In Dust Bowl, this is done through the usage of these red things called clip brushes, which show up invisible in-game, but still collide with your player. There's another material you may have heard of called player clip, which looks a little different, but in TF2, these two materials function exactly the same and can be used interchangeably. In this example, by orienting a clip brush such that it aligns with the top and bottom of each stair, a ramp is formed, which makes going up and down the staircase perfectly smooth and allows you to trimp or surf up it. Now, sometimes you'll find that these clip brushes don't reach the floor, which is typically seen as a problem, but the argument can be made that they shouldn't be depending on how the stairs are constructed. For example, the first step of this staircase on Dust Bowl is aligned with the neighboring walls, so extending the clip brush down to the floor would create this sudden jolt when walking along it. These other stairs by the second point experience the same thing, where extending the clip brush down would create a steep incline at the corner. I've also heard from some people that they like it cut off because it signals to them that they've stepped onto the staircase. I don't really have an opinion on this, so let me know what you think down in the comments. Regardless of whether our stairs are clipped down to or past the bottom step, the problem is largely solved, right? Well, not quite. There are two problems with using clip brushes this way. First, they sound like concrete when you walk over them. And second, they don't collide with projectiles like rockets and flame particles, so it's possible to shoot below an enemy on the stairs and not damage them because the explosions and flames get trapped between the steps. To remedy this, you can use this other material over the stairs called block bullets, which doesn't just block bullets and projectiles, but also collides with players like regular clip brushes. So now when you shoot a rocket, its explosion will always reach the enemy because it detonates outside of the crevices between the steps, and the flame particles will slide up the stairs instead of getting stuck. Cool, so now the problem is solved, right? After all, this is the convention, and Valve even used it when making Mercenary Park, so how could there be any drawbacks? Well, remember the first problem I brought up with clip brushes sounding like concrete? Yeah, that still happens with block bullets. Also, no bullet or explosion decals show up on the stairs underneath, and the brush can block your shots unintentionally at certain angles. Now that I think about it, maybe this shouldn't be the convention. What if we had something that could not only block players and explosions, but allow bullets to pass through and produce decals, all with the configurable surface type so that we don't just hear concrete? In other words, the perfect staircase. I did a bunch of testing in Hammer and VTF Edit, and here's what I found. The first thing I did was test all of the pre-existing materials to see if I could use one of them. I've already explained the issues with these first three, so let's try these other ones. This one here is called Block Bullets 2. Which is the same as block bullets except it doesn't cut vis leaves, which if you don't know, are boxes used to determine which parts of the map should be rendered. Now, I use the ABS mapping resource pack which automatically does that, so the vis leaves appear the same for both on my test map. But as far as trying to achieve the perfect staircase goes, it doesn't get us anywhere. Next is a material called Invisible. Again, this tool texture functions exactly like block bullets, but with one key difference. Its VMT file contains the compile past bullets parameter, which contrary to the name doesn't allow bullets to pass through, but does allow explosions to. This is why you can damage enemies with rockets and sticky bombs through this grade on Mountain Lab. Its material also has this past bullets parameter. But again, this doesn't help us, which leaves us with our final tool texture. Nodraw functions exactly like any regular material, except it's invisible. It still casts shadows, which are needed for certain things, but not stair clipping. Also, if you try to use it like a regular brush, this happens. Well, that covers all of the collision bearing tool textures, so that just about wraps up the video. Actually, there's one more material I learned of recently that's quite interesting. It's called invisible displacement, and it functions just like a regular clip brush when used on displacements. Sort of. If I fire a rocket at it, it goes through like a regular clip brush, but if I shoot some bullets, they simultaneously hit and pass through it. Also, when I walk over it, it sounds like dirt instead of concrete. Now, it might seem like this isn't going anywhere since our goal is to create the perfect staircase, and we don't want the rockets to be going through, or the bullets to be striking the surface, or the staircase sounding like dirt. So why do I say this material is interesting? For one, if we look at its VMT file, there's no compile clip parameter. This is important because if you try to make your own material with a specified surface, the compile clip parameter will override it and make the material function the same as a regular clip brush. Also, if you use it on a displacement, the map won't compile. So the fact that this material functions somewhat like a clip brush without using the compile clip parameter is already a sign of hope. So copying all of its parameters over to a new VMT file to create a new material, we can start tackling its problems. The first being the bullets and rockets hitting the top of the displacement and leaving two sets of decals. To remove the top set, we can add a simple parameter called noDecal that disables all decals from appearing on the material. Now when I shoot it, they only appear on the stairs. That's great, but it still sounds like dirt. Well, that's an even easier fix. The surface prop parameter is already there, so we can just change its value from dirt to wood, or whatever else we want, and it'll work. Now, because this is a displacement, you can get stuck on the sides, but by duplicating it, turning it back into a clip brush, and shifting it down one unit, we eliminate this problem. Wonderful. Now we only have one thing left to worry about: the rockets going through. How can we prevent that? Unfortunately, I don't think we can. For some reason, every other projectile in the game, including Demo's stickies, Pyro's flame particles, Enchi's rescue ranger, and even Sniper's bow, collide with the displacement normally. Soldier's rockets are the only thing that don't. Oddly enough, if I merely disable the material's transparency, somehow the rockets now collide with it. But we can't use this since the material has to be invisible, so regrettably, I have to leave things there. But that isn't to say there's no better alternative to the block bullets convention. In fact, there are two other solutions that are objectively better, so let's go over them. Since we just looked at displacements, I call this the brush solution. You cover a staircase just like you would with a clip or block bullets brush, but this time create a material just like the invisible displacement one I showed, and add the compile Nodraw parameter. If you don't, you'll run into some lighting problems. I actually recommend adding this parameter regardless because it doesn't affect displacements, so you can use the same material for either approach. This brush functions exactly like regular block bullets, but now has a configurable surface type. Just keep in mind that decals will still not appear on the stairs and your bullets will get caught. The final solution, which I'll refer to as the model solution, does show decals, but is a little more complicated. Looking at these stairs on upward, they're not covered with any clip brushes, yet you walk over them smoothly. Also, when you shoot them, the decals appear on the stairs, and rockets don't get trapped between the steps. What is this magic? Back in Hammer, I can enable this setting at the top to show each model's collision mesh. And looking at these stairs, we see that it doesn't match the exact shape of the staircase, and instead resembles the shape of a clip brush if we were to add one. But how does this work? Because this is a model, it wasn't made in Hammer. Instead, a 3D modeling software was used, like Blender. I've already gone ahead and extracted it so that we can see it a little easier. Here, we have the base reference model, which is the part you see in-game, and the physics model, which you don't see but collide with. If I change its viewport display to wire, all of a sudden it looks just like the version we see in Hammer. And this is what the compile parameters look like. This body group parameter defines the base mesh, which in this case is the one that ends in _reference, and this collision model one defines the collision mesh. Seems simple enough, but all of the other stuff can quickly give you a headache, and compiling source models is troublesome enough as is, so there's gotta be an easier way to do this than modeling an entire staircase and collision mesh in Blender. That's where we can use something called Proper. a hammer add-on that allows you to turn regular brushes into models without having to worry about the modeling or compiling. Once it's installed, all you have to do is select your staircase and turn it into a proper model entity. Now you give it a name, material, and surface property, change the smoothing mode to faceted, and enable snap to hammer grid. To add a collision mesh, just create one out of a regular brush entity, give it a name, and select it under the drop-down menu for physics mesh. Finally, compile the map under expert mode and make sure you have the configuration set to proper. Now you should be able to find your model in the model browser and make sure its collision setting is set to use vPhysics. Now you have your staircase. In my case, the collision mesh didn't align properly, so I had to shift it over in Blender and recompile the model. But the nice thing was that everything was already textured and scaled properly, and I didn't have to mess around with the compile parameters at all since Proper does it for you. The only downside to this method, besides having to go through all these steps, is that you'd have to create a bunch of these all over your map that you need to manually pack in later. And if you ever wanted to change something, you'd have to run Proper again. But as far as functionality goes, it's objectively better than all of the previous techniques as long as you do it correctly and make sure the collision mesh is lined up properly with the neighboring brushes. So that's TF2's Stair problem and all the different ways I found to fix it. But none of them are perfect one-size-fits-all solutions, and it's quite possible that there just isn't one. Thank you for watching. This is LED switching off.